Hello, everyone. My name is Lois. I'm the coordinator for the Center for Indigenous Educational Research at University of Toronto. And I'm here joined by Jocelyn Yu, a graduate assistant with the center who's also supporting the event today. And we want to welcome everyone to our second session in the guest speaker series. It's really wonderful to see you all here, some familiar faces. So thank you, as always, for attending and supporting the center's events. As Jocelyn's mentioned, just for some logistics, during the talk today, please kindly keep yourself on mute, but feel free to type any questions or comments that you have in the chat as we're going through, and we will have some time at the end of the session for Q&A, for some dialogue, for some discussion. So that's about it for logistics. I'll hand it over to Jocelyn for a land acknowledgement.
So we want to begin this session in a good way with acknowledging the traditional lands that the University of Toronto is on. So we acknowledge the traditional territory upon which we gather today. This land has a long and tangled history that carries the storied footprints of the Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe nations who have sought to walk gently on this land. They offered assistance to the first European traveler to this territory and shared their knowledge for survival. Toronto has a treaty with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and is part of the Dish with One Spoon agreement to share the land between the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee nations. We acknowledge the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And in moving forward towards reconciliation, we seek to polish the silver covenant chain and a restoration of the relationship between the original and settler peoples of this land, one based in honor and deep respect. And this is a land acknowledgement that can be found on the Deepening Knowledge Project, which is part of the center's work.
Thank you, Jocelyn. So with the same spirit that we opened today with the land acknowledgement, respect, relationship, community building, I'm very, very pleased to present our speaker for today, Emilce Carvajal Medina. Nancy self-identifies as a human being under construction, and her critical decolonial work within communities is grounded on Chicanx, Latinx Feminism and Indigenous knowledges. She's also the founder and the director of the research group Knowledge in Action, and she's generated peace-building processes within and outside the university to promote dialogue. So today, Nancy will share some lessons learned when conducting research on housing instability in the US, and how these lessons have enriched her role as a foreign language pre- and service teacher in Colombia. So Nancy, thank you so much again joining us from Colombia today, and we look forward to hearing from you. I'll pass it over.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'd also like to join the land acknowledgement by acknowledging the peoples, the Muisca community, which we inhabited these lands where I work and live these days. And I will ask all of you at this moment to close your eyes if you feel comfortable in doing so. And I'm going to ask you to take a very deep breath and take some air in and keep it in your belly for 1, 2, 3 times, and then release it. So we're gonna try to stay focused in this moment of connection, of dialogue, that has brought us, thanks to the technology, across the oceans, because we are here in the southern part of the American continent, and we are able to connect to you on the other side of this continent in the northern part and other parts of the world. So I'm going to invite you to take one more deep breath in and to be mindful of this moment again and to release it. May this be an opening. May I be an opening. May we be an opening to love. May this be an opening. May I be an opening. May we be an opening to love. So I'd like to acknowledge and offer this presentation to all the indigenous communities and the different communities that have been diminished and that have been stereotyped and judged and criminalized around the world. Also to the Colombian social leaders that have been murdered in 2023, which happened to be more than 100, which is a very cruel reality for us as Colombian citizens who are trying to build peace in the middle of the conflict. I would also like to acknowledge all our ancestors that have resisted and the communities and all of us who are here present today, thanks to the work that has been done by our ancestors. So I like to honor them, and also my family, my nephews, my nieces, my parents, Marco and Margarita, my brothers, Paola, Giovanni, and Chepe, and yeah, all my uncles and aunts that have been defining this path of leadership in my family that has allowed us to develop some work also for the communities. And I would like to also honor what's going on in Gaza with another song in Spanish. And this speaks about the drum and how the drum is allowing us to take our voice out to get to the hearts of our brothers and sisters around the world. Tamborcito, tamborcito, ayúdame a cantar. Tamborcito, tamborcito, ayúdame a cantar. Para que ya salga mi voz, para que salga mi voz, para que salga mi voz y que llegue a donde tenga que llegar. Al corazón de mi hermano, al corazón de mi hermana, al corazón de este pueblo, al corazón, al corazón. So as I said before, I'm sorry because I've got the flu, so my voice is not the best today, but I think that singing and the voice is a beautiful medicine to our souls and to our spirits. So with all my humility and, with all my love, I honor you and I honor our paths and understandings with this couple of songs. And also with the profound pain that I feel these days because of the children and the reality in Gaza. And hopefully you could get a chance to read this poem in honor of our children. And that is my deepest wish, that children could be protected from all these massacres and all this awful war. And part of my work as an educator is telling my pre-service teachers that our role is super, super important, to the extent that we can invite people to think of ourselves from a different place, different from hatred and from prejudice and from discrimination. So I welcome us all also by embracing this Maya principle that is in Latinx. I came across this principle back in 2014 when I was studying my doctoral program at WSU, Washington State University, the Cultural Studies and Social Thought in Education program. And I had the opportunity to come across many different Chicano Latino feminists and indigenous scholars. And I came across this beautiful Mayan principle that reminds me that I am always in relationship with other people, and how hard it is sometimes to love and to understand people who might assume other attitudes or behaviors or discourses with which our own ethical or personal or private practices do not align with. So in trying to see the other people as my own selves, as my other brothers and sisters, I remind myself of also seeing them in their complexity of our humanity, and also embracing them from the values that they display instead of seeing them in the possible flaws that I might consider that they might have. Because I am nobody to tell anybody that they've got certain flaws, but our humanity always goes on that direction. So this Mayan principle reminds me that you are my other self, and if I hurt you, I hurt myself. But if I love you and respect you, I love and respect myself. So with this invitation of reminding that we are brothers and sisters in relation in whatever works that we occupy, I want us to embrace at this moment all the understandings, all the lived experiences you have been going through, all the educational experiences also that you have been exposed to, in order to be open to some of the understandings and ideas that I will be sharing with you all today. So this is a painting that I drew back in the day when I was conducting my dissertation. And it is a reminder that all the little different wings are the different paths that we have all navigated in order to understand who we are and understand our place in the world, and also try to do something in order to contribute to the betterment of the world. So I guess that all of us in our own personal journeys are also having in mind communities and societal issues as well. So this painting is in order to honor all those different paths and questions that we have been wandering around throughout our lifetimes. So as some of you may know, I entitled this presentation, Decolonizing the Self, from research to a re-self search or a we search. In this case, I will share how transformational it was for me to come across scholars like Gloria Ansaldúa and Emma Perez and Linda Tujiwa Smith, who speaks about decolonizing methodologies, and also Sean Wilson, who speaks about being selves in relation, and Gloria Ansaldúa, that reminds me that we are mind, body, and spirit, and that our identities are very complex layers that intertwine, and we will never get a definite answer of who we are completely or as a whole. That we will continue like navigating all these layers of identity. So hopefully I will be able to share today 3 different layers of understanding. The first is to myself, my own self, what are my roots and what is part of my decolonial journey. The second thread of understanding has come in working with communities and how I've been interested in building bridges between the communities and academia. And finally, what could be an invitation that I could leave for us all today. So first of all, so I live in the Andean region of Colombia, as you see there. So I have a peasant roots in my blood, so it's important for me to acknowledge. And then part of this decolonial journey, being a peasant daughter and granddaughter, has been enriching to come across Paulo Freire's idea in relation to what he considers is one of the goals of critical thinking or critical views, and it is questioning power relationships. It is how to be mindful and aware that when we wash our hands of the conflict between the powerful and the powerless, that's not that it means that we are siding with the powerful and not to be neutral. So you are very familiar with these discussions of neutrality in academia. So we are meant to be neutral, but when we are human beings with all these 3 dimensions, mind, body, and spirit, how can we be neutral and not to be sorrowful and try to take action with the things that we do? So this is part of my family. So my youngest nephew is missing the picture. So he's a few months old. So this is part of my brothers, my sisters, my nephews, who are part of the inspiration of this work. So when I came to the state, when I went to the States in 2013, I was interested in investigating one reality I had been working with in Colombia, that was displacement. So Colombia is one of the countries where internal displacement occurs due to violence that is being inflicted by different armed groups. But back in the day, there were some difficulties in continuing the work with the NGO that I had been already working with displaced youth and children. So then I decided to shift the lens of my study, and I started analyzing the realities in Washington state, in the area that I was living in, the border between Idaho and Washington. And I started wondering, okay, so what are the social issues that are present in the territory? And I came across housing instability. So then I decided to visit the 2 shelters that were nearby the place where I was studying, Washington State University. And one of the shelters opened the doors to me and said, okay, so welcome. So you're more than welcome to come and visit and talk to people and so on. So I started in 2014 this journey of visiting the shelter every Friday for during the whole day, every week. And then I had the possibility to engage in powerful conversations and dialogues with children, with youth, with men and women that were living in the shelter or of the shelter, but that they were being supported by this organization. So in one of my encounters, I met Samantha, and at some point of building the relationship, like over a period of 3 months, we decided that it was the time for her to share her testimonial of what she was experiencing. So we met that day, and then we were sat down there in the office, in the place that we have been given to hold this dialogue. And then she started crying. And then I said to her, like, we don't have to do this. You don't have to tell me your story. Like, it's pretty much okay. And then she said to me, the thing is that my story is the only thing I own. So when she said that to me, my story is the only thing I own, I internally started like questioning what I was doing there in the shelter. What is my right? What right do I have to tell people who are in a very emotional, psychological, a financial hard stage to sit down with me and to share part of what they are going through. So anyways, we decided with Samantha to come out and to walk for a while, to go and walk with her pet. And then after a few more minutes, I had already told her like, no, we didn't have to do that, and she didn't have to tell me anything. But then she said, no, I want to tell you my story because I know you, and I know who you are, and I know what your intentions are. Because as I said before, we had been building the relationship for a few months earlier to that conversation, or before that conversation took place. So then the fact that she felt confident enough, but of course, the fact that she was going to speak something so meaningful to in that moment to her life was like a reminder for me in terms of this ethical bell, what I call my ethical bell, in every work that I do and everything that I teach since that day, since 2014, is my story is the only thing I own. Whenever I'm writing, whenever I'm presenting, whenever I'm teaching on the colonial research methodologies, I always bring Samantha's voice to remind ourselves of the importance um, of the research venue, but also how we as researchers are invited to revise our research agendas, to let go of our expectations, to really build those agendas with the communities we are working with, and not imposing, our agendas, which should be part of the colonial idea that we are the saviors, that we are the know-it-alls, that we are the ones who have the answers and are going to solve a situation, because that might not necessarily be the truth, right? And that is not the approach in order for us to really contribute to the understanding of a complex social reality, even more when people are already experiencing hardships. And we are like coming to demand something for a requirement for a graduation or for a publication. But what else beyond publication? What is it that we are going to leave the communities with, and what is it that we are going to build with communities throughout the research process, so that it become a meaningful practice for both sides, and we can impact a third part of the population, that are those people who are going to be interested in listening to us when sharing or disseminating the results or the understandings that we develop in our research study. So for me, it's very important to share this part of my decolonial journey, and how the communities really, for me, are the ones that ground me all the time. So they are the ones that allow me to revisit my motivations for doing any kind of social work, any kind of peace building practice, any kind of reconciliation moment that we are generating in here is the communities. So I'm going to read a little fragment from one of our exchanges with Samantha, because it was super powerful for me to see how her story and her life and her narrative was her art project. So for her, the label of being a homeless person was something that didn't quite reflect who she was. It didn't fit for her. And because she said, the only thing I have is my story. So if you can preserve it and keep it somehow scientific. So she was asking me to turn it into a scientific. So in this case, Samantha had a master's, so she was an educated, let's say, woman. She was upper middle class, and she happened to live a life circumstance that led her to housing instability. So she was like, she had this scientific perspective of what research could become, like this detached kind of process, like this kind of neutral kind of process. And it was super ironic for me because I was trying to re-signify research and bring the decolonial perspective, but then I had a person who was asking me, okay, turn it more scientific in the sense that is going to be more neutral, more objective, and not to really reveal so many details about my own story. So the story or the fragments of story that appear in my dissertation are what Samantha considered that would be worth or would be meaningful for her to share. So this is when I started to also become aware of the idea of labels, and I started questioning those labels and what they represent for many different people. I will come back to that. And then I've got a question in here in order for us to analyze if we have ever felt afraid, or if we have ever felt fragmented, or if at some point in our lives we have felt that we don't fit into whatever spaces or scenarios we occupy, or if we have felt like we are weird or paralyzed or out of place. So these are emotions that people we have been working, or I have been working with over the years, have experienced, but I have also been experiencing these realities. Okay, I will just move on so that I can cover probably a second point of the conversation. So when we think about the word colonization, so we are familiar with this idea of the territories being colonized, but alongside the territories, it is also the bodies and the peoples being colonized, when being uprooted from their traditions, when being denied the opportunity to speak their native languages, when their traditions, of course, are put at risk, and their spiritual dimensions are also removed from who they are. So I've been trying to work or deepen on this idea of how research has also been a colonizing space when they ask researchers to be neutral and objective, and to remove us also from our emotional, bodily, kinesthetic, and even spiritual dimensions. So back in the day, I was feeling some unrest when I studied my dissertation, and I came across of this objectivity kind of these conversations. But then when I read the book Flesh in the Spirit from Elisa Facio and Irene Lara, that is a group of, collects a group of different testimonials from different scholars around the world. And they were bringing all these three dimensions together. And I said, okay, so this might be one way for us to already say other things from a research perspective. So one of the clarities that I have had in terms of research is that for indigenous communities, of course, and some of you might be familiar with this idea of Linda Trujillo Smith when she says that research is one of the deadest works in the indigenous world. Then we have Margaret Kovach, who says that research cannot become, when we follow this colonizing agenda, these research studies represent objective studies of the other. And then also we have Cynthia Saavedra and Niemer, who says that sometimes colonial research ends up being the regurgitation of hierarchical, patriarchal, homophobic, and capitalist relations. And it was super interesting for me to also come across with these critiques of Kathy Hayden in terms of critical ethnography, because for her back in the day in 2004, still criticality in terms of ethnography was too theory driven. So still we had not achieved the transformational dimension that social justice agendas or critical agendas are searching or gearing towards or searching for. So for me, all this experience of analyzing how the researcher is invited to be positioned, where our voices, as I have reiterated it in this presentation, are meant to be neutral, detached, where our epistemologies and ontologies are meant to embrace certain Western view, and not, we are not offered a space or a venue where, in my case, for example, I can bring my peasants knowledges and roots in order to be into conversation with whatever theorizations that I've been doing. So that is also a way in which the colonizing agenda manifests. So I could understand that as a researcher, we could experience sometimes this fragmentation of ourselves, where our minds and cognitive dimensions are mostly favored, and our bodily and kinesthetic dimensions are left aside. And then we somehow represent this, enter these dynamics of us being, as I said before, the know-it-all, and the others being, the ones to be rescued or the ones to be saved to some extent. And then when I also was analyzing what these kind of colonial research agendas represent for the other part, the participants or the people we are working with, and also denying them in their humanity, and denying the fact that they also have some ontologies, that they are also epistemological beings, that they also are political beings. And the voices in my study really reminded me of that, because, for example, Crisan was a woman, and that is her real name, who told me, like, don't tell me that the American dream is like is the savior for the American citizens. I am a U.S. citizen, and the American dream has not worked for me at all. And then she said, I want my name. I don't want a pseudonym in your study. I want my name to be known, because I have a lot to say, and I want people to hear what I say. So this strength of this 60-plus-year-old lady was super powerful and super inspiring for me, because again, it was another reminder for me to really critique or explain in my dissertation that people we work with are political beings, and they have knowledges and epistemologies, and they have values, of course, that are super important to be brought into the world in order to give a more nuanced view of whatever reality we are studying. But humanizing them is a very important component in the colonial agendas. And as I said before, there was like a third layer for what I call back in the day the 21st century neocolonial research condition. That is the same debate that we know that exists between, the dichotomy or the importance of these objective studies over the subjective studies, how it's much more important to verify information and to prove it and to be super objective than to embrace these other dimensions. And then I came across this work of George Noblit and his students, who were proposing this idea of the post-critical condition. In some conversations with him, I asked him, like, hey, professor, I read the book that in 2004, there was only one book on post-critical ethnography. I'm pretty sure that the conversation has expanded during the last years. And then I asked him, like, hey, what was your logics for you and your students to propose this post-critical condition? And then he said, well, what we analyzed is that critical agendas are searching or social transformation, and we are not there yet. So what we wanted to do with the post-critical condition is generating the conditions or offering some examples of how we could mobilize critical social justice agendas, so that we could really achieve the transformational stage, right? So in these early years of the 2000s, in these conversations with Dr. George Noblit, so we ended up concluding that even naming the field post-critical was not a guarantee to achieve transformation that is intended by critical agendas. So we are not there yet, probably fully, as much as we wanted to in our field, but still, so what we were concluding is we need to revisit those scholars, like Paulo Freire for us in Latin America is super important. And we know that other scholars like Henry Giraud and Peter McLaren, and Michael Apple, and Antonia Darder, that is another Chicana Latina feminist, are expanding, and they have been doing important work in critical agendas. But again, in order for me to analyze what is the type of research that is being promoted in graduate and undergraduate courses, so we usually come across with a westernized view of research where objectivity is being promoted. So not other kind of research studies that are grounded on decolonial views, on feminist views, at least in our case now in Colombia. So we are opening like a field in order to these other kinds of research studies to be conducted. So for me, when we position the researcher as this fragmented self, and then the research also experiencing another fragmentation where the whole self is not being embraced, and then asking these questions about whose voices are being heard in a study, whose voices are being left aside, um, what are the stories that are untold in some kinds of research. Those kinds of questions let us think of what we are really doing in terms of research, what are the goals and the motivations, and if we are promoting colonize, dehumanize individuals, or on the other hand, if we are moving away or moving beyond these ideas of the savior positionality, of the neutral researcher positionality, of the objective researcher positionality, to embrace a much more complex reality of who we are, and at the same time to heal, decolonial agendas are an opportunity to revise our own processes and heal and grow with the communities we work with. So yeah, in my dissertation, one of the goals was challenging even the word homeless. And then with the people I was working with, the participants or the selves in relation I was working with, we started like questioning a lot of this narrative, because the issue with the labels is that there's like a lot of stereotypes and imaginaries being built around the homeless. We usually, in studies, psychological studies, sociological studies, mention that when we say the homeless, they refer to, or they associated the expression with an epidemic, with people who are lazy, that are mentally ill, that are drug addicts. And very interestingly for me enough, I found one article where even they were referring to women that experience housing instability as witches. That was one of the most interesting things I could ever come across, and that leads to another conversation. But anyways, so the message here is that labels that are imposed by the society, that are societally constructed, that are reinforced by the media, that are reinforced by research, continue to pathologize and continue to denigrate and stigmatize a population. So the invitation for us as researchers is what is the discourse that we use, and how does that discourse represent like the building blocks in the process of building an identity that may inhibit people or may inhibit communities to see the individuals in the beauty and in the complexity of who they are. And to really, in this case, also, I was highlighting the institutional responsibility. So people don't live in the streets because one day they wake up and say, oh, today I'm going to be living in a park, like today I am not going to be working because I just don't want to. People don't make up those decisions by themselves. So there's life circumstances. And there is a system, a housing system that is super expensive. You cannot afford to buy or even rent a place. And even, of course, there's also another issue with people who have committed certain crimes, go to jail, and then when they leave jail, so they they are part of a cycle that they cannot leave because they are not given job opportunities. So that is part of the systems that we have created. So anyway, so I speak about the building blocks in my study. So for me, what would be some decolonial moments throughout this journey? And one decolonial moment for me is to allow ourselves as researchers to reassess the values that divide and to find our own voice in the theorizing attempts. So if you take a look at my dissertation, you can see that I allow myself to do some paintings, to draw, to bring my peasants' roots and stories, to connect that reality with, to some extent, with the reality in Colombia, and to really find my voice being tuned up from a different place than objectivity. So I was writing my dissertation as a story, as a trip, as a travel, and I was weaving my testimonial with other people's testimonials in the study. A second decolonial moment is this reminder that my friend Sean Wilson makes in the book Research is Ceremony. So this book is super powerful, and then he is super upfront with this statement. I really love it. because he says humans, feeling, breathing, thinking humans do research, right? So we cannot forget that we are humans, right? And one of our roles might be to be a researcher. But what does it mean to be a human? That I feel, right? That I think, that I have my own issues, my own problems, and that might be a place also for thinking and reflecting and understanding and theorizing too, right? So that is a second decolonial moment that our indigenous brothers and sisters and Latino feminists, Chicano Latino feminists lead for us. And in this sense, so he also reminds us that we are selves in relation, right? So if I don't see myself in this hierarchical position of, I've got a PhD or I've got a postdoc or I've studied 3 careers and I've got, I don't know how many degrees, and I've traveled around the world, etc., etc. And if I consider that all those degrees or experiences place me in a higher position than other people that I'm working, living, studying with, so so let's revise what is that hierarchical position leading to each one of us. What are we gaining out of that? That would be the only thing that I would say, and we can continue talking in a few minutes about that, right? So I have proven to myself that I am not interested in these hierarchical positions. I am interested in engaging in my own healing processes while I develop understandings in working with other people so that we can all better our social conditions and we can contribute to peace building, in my case in Colombia. And then this other decolonial moment is that every human being is a holder of knowledge. So definitely people have diverse knowledges that come from experience, that come from their own particular realities they have been going through. And one of the other decolonial moments is this spiritual condition. So this definition is very interesting to me because this aligns with my artivist also layer that I have. And Elenes reminds us that spirituality may be defined as understanding someone's or a community position in the world. So trying to make sense of unfair economic conditions and gender inequality and to do something about it. So Freire is super important for us in my research group, Knowledge in Action, because he reminds us that being a critical thinker is taking action and being in praxis, reflection and action, reflection and action. So when I read Elenes, it was also this idea of spirituality as grounded in action as the result of whatever concerns we might be interested in solving or at least understanding deeper or at least exploring some ways out of those conditions of inequality or injustice. So I really love this spiritual the definition of spirituality, because of course there might be some, and there are some other definitions, but to me this is as a good reminder, and as I tell my parents, so if I am meant to follow one spiritual principle, would be the one of love, and loving for me means to embrace other people's humanity. And if I can take action in whatever reality I consider that is unfair or is not, like not promoting justice, so then I will do my best to respond to that reality. And finally, Ansaldúa reminds us of this healing part. Healing is important part of the spiritual activism. Healing individual and group ideas about body, mind, and spirit, and naming without fragmenting. So this is the core of the work of decolonizing the self. So how do we do some work with our minds, those ideas that have been transmitted over the years of who we are meant to be as individuals, as daughters, as wives, as women, as men, as LGBTQI members. So we have been receiving all this idea of the molds where we should fit because we are meant to embrace some labels. So as Luis mentioned at the beginning, I challenge labels because I identify as a human being under construction. So that is a messy process, you know. And then we are like, yeah, you experience many different things. So that's what I tell my students. I warn my students and my colleagues. So bear with me because I'm a human being under construction. So I might, you know, have some attitudes and behaviors that might be disrupting at some times or might not be completely understood at some other points. So healing is at the core of the work that we do, and also the importance of naming so that we don't feel fragmented at some points. So I'm just gonna move faster. I'm gonna take like 3 more minutes. This is part of my decolonial journey during the dissertation. So I was like in a constant work with the communities, fundraising for the shelter, creating arts, developing workshops for people in the town for them to understand this reality and offer people a different possibility. So for me, this is an ongoing process that starts building up all the time. That is what I call an activist research methodology, and a decolonial research methodology. It's by itself. So in my dissertation, the participants are called selves in relation. The data collection methods are called knowledge gathering methods, and the data analysis is labeled or named stories interpretation. So in the work that I have been doing in terms of building bridges with academia and the communities, so with the Truth Commission that was created in 2018, I had the opportunity to join their efforts to build peace and understand and listen to the communities here in the territory. And then I could talk to some social leaders who were really making us some invitation, and some also some ex-militants from different armed groups, and they were inviting the academia to build bridges. And they said, hey, like one of the roles or the goals of academia should be to bring theory and reality together, because theory is so far removed from the realities that we are experiencing. And also another social leader, Leo Vigildo, was reminding us of offering spaces, very profound spaces of reflection for students, so that they could feel the other person in the bone and the flesh. He says here in this quote that's in Spanish, he says, we need students to feel the bone and flesh of the people they have in front of them. So we have been using arts. We have been inviting displaced youth and children in the southern part of the city where I live and work, Tunja, to make their own murals, so you can see, and the youth are also making their own murals. We could build another mural that is called Respect and Memory, and we could have the president of the Truth Commission that appears in the picture, Padre Francisco de Rue, coming to receive all these results of collective creation with the communities. So for me, I will just probably leave you with this other decolonial moments, like the interconnectedness is important, knowing, understanding, and deconstructing the legacies of the oppressive past is important to decolonial agendas. The testimonials are sources of knowledge. This is an invitation to continue decolonizing ourselves and other people that we work with, and reimagine a world that's different. So in the midst of chaos and despair, we can reimagine the world, and frame our identities and allow other people's identities to be framed from a different perspective. So my final invitation is to ask yourself these questions at some point, and some of the questions are, what do our voices sound like and speak to? What agendas does our work ascribe to? What are the values that inform our ways of being and thinking? And why and how do we engage in research? In other words, what are the motivations that lead us to embark on critical decolonial research journeys? So I think that this would be key questions for those of us who are interested in doing and continue enriching and expanding decolonial agendas. So I will close with this quote of my mentor, Gloria Saldúa, who says that we are ready for the change. So let's join our hands and our hearts so that we can find the way through the darkness in the forest, so that we can leave the footprints for other people to follow them. so that we can build bridges and cross those bridges with grace, so that we can reclaim those bridges as our home. So with my wish for all of you to be good and safe and well, and continue navigating your journeys with patience and so much love that is needed to our own selves and others, I am open to the dialogue here with you all, and I thank you for having listened to these few insights and reflections that I share with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I see some hearts, some claps from the room. That was wonderful to hear from your work. So I would just invite folks to raise hand or type in chat if you have any questions for Nancy. We have some time. Feel free to also just unmute. We seem to be a small group, relatively small, so we could do that too. Maybe as people are gathering their thoughts, Nancy, I did have a question for you. And it's on sort of this weaving through that I see sort of in your work and as you talk, and art and sort of, doing painting and doing drawing. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit to sort of the importance of that in your own journey.
Yes, so for me, I'm a very visual person. So I'm always taking notes and making sketches, and I have like a lot of papers with so many different drawings and so on. So when I was conducting my dissertation, I needed to make sense of everything that I was reading and try to bring like the puzzle together, and then weaving manillas, like these kind of things that we wear on our wrists, like weaving them and painting was part of my thinking process. So this was an opportunity for me to think through it from a different angle and from a different perspective, and to let it flow. It's like the flowing of the thinking or the thought is being given through painting. And I'm actually like gonna show you, like, this is like a work in progress that I've got in here. So this is starting with a little seed of the corn, and then this is a painting about my own self and my own journey. So for me, painting is another way of thinking, and I'm letting my thoughts like come through and try to understand even what I'm thinking and finding answers to the work that I'm doing. So for me, the dissertation and all the work that I have been doing afterwards, painting has been super important for me to see things from a different angle. And then an indigenous scholar told me, like, hey, if you look at your painting from this direction, what do you see? But then if you put it like this, what do you see? But then if you turn it like this, what do you see? And then if you finally move it on the other direction, what do you see? Right? So she was like reminding me of these different angles that we can have when trying to understand one topic or one element, or work with the communities, or even working on our own journeys or agendas. So that's important. That's it. And we don't need to be, experts in drawing or anything, but it's just trying it out. I am not a painter, like I have never studied painting or anything, but it is like visual representations that I make, for understanding what I do or finding answers, as I said before.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luis.
Again, if folks have thought, feel free to raise hand or type in chat. But yeah, that was so, it's incredible to learn about your journey, Nancy, and to sort of think through, and as a PhD student myself, kind of trying to figure out that and figure out how sort of those decolonial moments appear, like how they appear even in the art you do or in the work that you're thinking through or the conversations one has. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and then my advice would be is like, I'm pretty sure that all of you are connected to different scholars and people that have inspired you, is finding your own journey also, and allowing yourselves to speak to the truth that is also true to yourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And then what I remind my students in Colombia is that there have been people doing already decolonial work, so that we can build the arguments for us in the master's program or in a doctoral program, for us to write from a different perspective, for us to conduct research methodologies from a different angle. So we are not inventing or making up anything new, but we are enriching those lenses that have been already out there, and they are meaningful to us to the extent that throughout our own experience, we can expand the conversation and speak about the challenges and speak up also about the possibilities. So I also like to share with you all that as a result of this journey that I was engaging in the dissertation between 2013 and 2017, I created 2 courses on decolonial methodologies for undergrads and 2 courses for graduate students. I have been involved in rituals as part of my teaching as well, and singing songs like the ones that I sang to you today. So my classes start from a different place that is not necessarily theories or authors. Of course, we read the authors and the theories, but the ways we connect to the authors are different because we speak connecting to ourselves first. So that's the first part on the research journey that students navigate when they are mentored by me, or the students that take my classes, so they can see some weird things in the classroom, like I bring a blanket and I bring candles and I bring other elements that represent the air and the fire and the water and the earth and the wind. But then at the beginning, they never ask questions, but afterwards they start, we want to understand what this is. But subconsciously or not rationally speaking, so they start experiencing some changes. And then at some point they realize, okay, something's going on with my thinking in this class, something is going on with my feeling about myself and others and the social realities we are studying, and something is going on about the kind of research that I want to do. So I just wanted to share with you all that in these years after my dissertation, like, this work walks with me. This work is part of who I am. I mean, it's not something that you might think in academia. It's like everything has an expiration date. We are meant to cite authors from the last 5 years because the articles prior to that are not, I don't know, whatever they might want to say in academia. But anyways, there's foundational work, and this work is, for me, is part of my journey, super important, that accompanies me till this day. So it doesn't matter that Samantha's voice, I listened to Samantha's voice in 2014. So how many years have already passed? Almost 10 years. But that voice is still with me, you know, and that resonates with whatever decisions that I make and whatever journeys that I embark. So I've been expanding this work in terms of research, in terms of, I'm going to co-teach actually in King's College. The next year, I'm going to co-teach a course on decolonizing methodologies. This is going to be my 2nd year co-teaching with them. So this means that the work is opening and is resonating with people. So, and I have been co-teaching also another course in Plymouth University, and this is my 5th year. So people are resonated and are in much need of listening to all these different views and perspectives. So allow yourselves to explore your own paths. And yes, Arlo, you've got a question or a comment? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I saw a question from Arlo as well. Yeah.
Hi, folks. Hi, Nancy. How's it going? It's good to see you. I don't have a big question. I just want to thank you. I really appreciated your remarks and the sort of theoretical and personal and sort of expansive nature of it all. There's so much there, and it's really generous of you to share it and to share it in this way. So just sharing my gratitude for your energy and your thinking and your stories. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And we met with Arlo actually here in Colombia. So there was a social justice event in here. So it was pretty interesting for us to connect here. I'm super glad that you were here. So thank you so much for being here and for listening and caring.
For sure. I wish you were here in person. That's the only thing. If you were, it would be great to have you here, but next time.
Yeah, we will be working on that to make it happen in the coming years. We'll see.
Oh, that's amazing how there's so many paths crossing. I love it. Nancy, I did see in the chat, there's some comments as well. Nicoletta said that art is a common place where we can all meet in order to understand, process, and imagine. Thanks you for your work, your inspiring work. And Talar also says, your research is inspiring. Thank you for sharing that she's taking a course that teaches us how to be more self-critical and is on that journey as well. Yes. Oh, and I see one other one from Shamina here. Thank you. As a non-Indigenous researcher working with Indigenous community, I feel my lenses need adjustment every moment, which have been extremely helpful to self-actualize, which otherwise wouldn't be possible. Oh, yeah, some great comments there. Thank you all for sharing. I want to leave space in case anyone wanted to ask a final question or a final thought. But otherwise, Nancy, it's been so wonderful to hear from you during this talk today. I know this is not the last time we'll be seeing each other. It's great to kind of connect in multiple ways through the center, sort of in this hybrid space where we can connect across oceans, like you've been saying earlier. So yeah, I just want to say thank you very much again, Nancy.
No, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to think through these ideas. Every time that I talk about this, I am left with more inspiration from your comments. You also allow me to see what is important to people to hear about and for me to continue thinking about. So I appreciate every one of your comments and your presence, and just a little reminder to be patient with our own journeys, to give ourselves a lot of love, and I stand in solidarity with all those of you who might not have friends or relatives in Gaza, or that are close to that reality, or who are experiencing other hard realities in your context. So I send you all my love and my gratitude. I appreciate so much for this wonderful space of dialogue and connection. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much again, Nancy. There was a lot of learning even for myself. I come from a background as an educator, and so there was many things even from your talk. I know I'm not in the research space, but even approaching like how do you interact with students in the classroom. So I took a lot from the critical lens that you provided there, and thank you for your sharing, as it's been echoed already. And thank you for those of you who were able to join us today during the lunch hour for this learning. And we hope that you're able to take something with you back into your different contexts, whether it's in research or as for myself in education. And so thank you again for this time, and please look forward. We do have some exciting events in January and the coming year. And so if you are interested, please let us know, and we can add you to our mailing list, or you can follow us on our socials, which you can see on the screen behind us. And that's all for today. So thank you again for learning with us. And thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay.